show and tell, videoing that so we can put that on the website because we feel like there's an awful lot to learn from the show and tell for members who aren't able to make it or for other people who are following our channel. And then we have one jig on the lathe to look at, a variation of the router jig. And then we have some very interesting decorative techniques using pyrography and various coloring techniques. So I think that's the agenda, plus any other mini demos or if anyone wants some hands-on, we can set something up. In terms of the business meeting, we were talking about a Mike Mahoney video, right? One of those remote conferences, but doing it not as an extra, but doing it as part of one of these meetings. So maybe January or shortly thereafter, we would have our regular business meeting and show and tell, and then around 11:30 or so in California time is a little more reasonable, doing the video conference as our demonstration for that.
It'd be probably 2 hours.
And would there be a small fee for that, or would the club cover that?
It would be a small
fee for
because
that.
the last fee was club covered, I think.
And so with Mike's here, maybe we can get a club dues update. It's not quite the end of the year, but come January, we'll be looking at another round of dues. Any other, are we on then for December for what had been scheduled here? Mike and Ed doing their demonstration?
Do a demonstration on boxes and lidded boxes. Screw on lid. I'm not sure if he's going to do screw on, but nicely fitted bits.
Well, and Mike's done some stuff with the embedded rare earth magnets, and there are a lot of different things you can do to make that.
That'll be Mike and Ed doing that demo.
Yeah. So that's December. That's December 2nd Saturday. We'll try to get back on our regular 2nd Saturday schedule. And then do we need to get together with the steering committee to figure out?
Yes, we do.
So we'll try to get together before that meeting maybe, so that we can figure out what's happening in February, March, April, May. So we want to do, right?
Yep. And then we can also
Sit right here.
So if anyone has good ideas, either they'd like to present something or they know someone they'd like to bring in to present, send us an email.
Yeah.
We'll try to get that on the schedule. Any other, that's old business, any new business you need to cover? No? In that case, let's move right ahead. Who'd like to start with the show and tell? Start in the far corner there.
the board of the holes.
I was in the shop this week and I had to think about how much I like this, as ugly as it is. And it's pretty obvious, I suppose, but I don't know if everybody has done this. But I had a jam truck and I had to look at how I could hold tools that were being used on the current job. So this slides between the ways and swings off the end of the lathe. So it's right there at my right hand all the time. And so whatever tools I'm using in that job, just get kept right there. Like this? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a piece of scrap, 2 pieces of scrap, and a bolt with a wing. And you
Work on your finish a little bit.
I'm sorry?
You need to work on your finish.
Sanding.
That's how I would use it. So, just for what it's worth, if you haven't, you use anything like it. What I have with my Powermatic is I have the extension, and I have it dropped down so I can turn it.
Big stuff.
Yeah. So this usually sits on that low extension, but if I have the extension up, I keep this at the very back end, I can still get the tail stick out. So it's just one of my little time savers. When you're doing stuff with scrap, I didn't know that. But
He needs his 3 clubs, so I'll just do.
I came across a piece of like this, and I thought, why does it have to be round? So I just turned this, cut up about 3,000 RPM.
Yes.
And as long as you get the speed up and turn with the left hand, stay out of the turning radius. If you're like me and can't stand to throw away wood, there you go. That's all.
You're going that way?
Yeah, let's do the stone.
Okay.
Some soapstone.
Stone, run 3 stone projects, just to, as an example of what you can do with it. This is a French style rolling thing. On pens, so roll. I'm thinking of doing a YouTube video on turning soapstone, there's nothing out there at all.
Where did you get tools?
Primarily use scrapers, you can't use blades. Okay.
Where do you get the stuff?
Different places, old stoves, soapstone stove, or old sinks.
Yeah.
Rarely found stock any bigger than this, so that kind of limits what I can turn.
I'm sorry, did you say where you get your stone?
Soapstone sinks.
Oh, old ones, yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Or you can also talk to people who fabricate soapstone sinks and get the sink cut out. Just the scraps.
I think it'd be a good medium for those, little handles that go on, screws and bottle tops. It'd be really good for that. It polishes up really nicely with sandpaper, it cuts very
What
fast.
about the soapstone stove company over in Lebanon? No, well, they don't make them in Lebanon. They're Bethel, Randolph, and Karen.
I haven't been there.
But what's about the yeah,
We put them
a
together.
lot of soapstone.
They put them together in Lebanon.
Yeah, Vermont Soapstone actually has you can go there and some of them, they have some larger scrap. I've gone over, I use them for some of my bases and they have piles and you have to kind of sort through it and they're willing to let you sort through their scrap piles and take what you like.
Where?
Well, you know where North Springfield Dam is?
Yeah.
Sort of on the back side of that, there's I think it's a state park called Stoughton Pond. It's real close to that. So you actually go through Perkinsville is closer town. It's actually probably in Perkinsville or very close to it.
There's also in your neck of the woods on the road between where you get off the interstate and Springfield, one of the old Logan industrial buildings on the way into Springfield. There's a place there that does kitchen. that
Right,
does
yeah.
kitchen powder.
Yeah, I've never gone in there. I actually got some counters from its predecessor. That's
Is it
somebody else
soapstone or
went out of
granite?
business. That's mostly granite there.
Yeah. Well, we got
But they may
we got
have
a
soapstone too. Yeah.
Morning.
High-speed steel or?
Awesome. Thanks, Barry.
These are little pointy things. I think they're carbide, but regular scrapers work too. Don't use anything with a sharpened edge. Soapstone occasionally has inclusions or crystals of pyrite. You can see them here, they're cubic crystals, also known as blue gold. Those are a lot harder than soapstone itself, but they do sand down flat. Doesn't need any finish, there's no green, you don't have to work downhill. There's a lot of differences. So, in the next meeting, I can bring in a bunch of samples if people want to try it.
How about your drive center? What are you using for drive center?
Let's see. I was using the pieces start out square, so I used a chop. But I think you could use a square center, recut the groove, and drill a hole. You gotta be really gingerly. Look at gingerly. Don't put anything. So it's square. Every corner is an impact. So I took a felt sander, less than a minute for each corner. And of course, paper, they brought it down to an octagon. And that took a lot of the impact out. Because this look. You know, I haven't gone over 1,000, 1,200. Getting hit by a rock, getting hit by a little piece of wood. That face shield hits you the whole time. I just tried my motorcycle again.
On your pinpoint, I mean, drilling it out.
No, it drills nicely, it scrapes nicely, it sands nicely. I just stay away from I have another swing tail over there that's too heavy to carry across the room. Maybe I'll do this first and then go.
That's a lot.
The fluted goblet there.
That's me.
Someone would like to beer.
Yeah, this is a good shape actually for fluid, I thought. And I made the.
Hold up, wait, Gary, so we can get some pictures.
You can crop carry out there.
Thank you. So I made it a little thinner at the top edge here so that my router bit went through a little bit, and then I just finished them off. I thought that worked out pretty good. And you know, when you're fluting, if you want to see the flute, you have to have something that's kind of tall, kind of vertical, where you want it all underneath. So that's that, and I have a floating jig, the jig that I made, I have over on the machine. Over there now or later.
We'll move over there after this.
Okay.
It's poisonous.
That's what I remember about the bark.
Black locust.
Black locust, there you go, and it's end grain turn.
And you notice we're all dead after turning.
Where this maple mold?
Yep.
Big on the new wave?
Yeah, made on the new lathe.
Say again?
Where's that big strip from? It's, this was a piece of firewood. So it's a straight maple, and after the last crop there, I had a little extra money, so I bought a fluting jig. It's an Ashley Isles fluting jig, and it works like a charm. It's the best one I've ever seen. And you just polish the end of it a little bit with the diamond home. And I did that every other cut, so it gave me pretty clean.
It's a jig as opposed to the Ashley Isles
No,
gouge.
it's not a gouge. It's a rectangular piece of rod, and it's got a slope like that on it, and on the top edge there's a little 1/8-inch channel groove in it, and so that the end of the tool's got.
Yes, I bought it's not a gouge either, but I bought their tool that can do an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch bead, sort of. But it's not, I don't remember it as being a flat piece of metal. It's interesting.
Okay, it's like a parting tool.
Yeah,
Except it's got just that little.
yeah. I know what you mean.
And it's so easy to
Did
try.
you get tear out?
Very little, because you just run your diamond home over that and then do a cut.
Do you think it saved you time over coving every bead?
Oh, no. Get it just like that, even one.
That's great.
Tool handle.
You need to go.
Target heights.
This is thanks to Peter from his tool holder there. I made a little different design where it's got a little pump right there. It's a good feel for it having that piece there, and even the knob there is helpful.
So one of the things we try to do is if we have a demonstration, maybe a few people try that and into their version of it, like big over here. I have to say that is an excellent improvement on the basic tool handle. It's quite elegant. I'd almost be a little hesitant to bang it around. stuff would be quite functional.
I think it's a perfect match for the toolbox.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea to have underneath your seat when you're going to Boston. Huh?
Yeah.
So you use a texturing tool for
For
the.
the design.
And what did you use for the color? Is that one of the
It's a water-based template.
I've been trying to finish up a bunch of bowls that have been sitting around in the shop for a while. So these are 3 examples of milk paint finish, all cherry. So they would start off with a regular cherry, sanded down to 400, I think. And then painted with a fairly thin coat of black milk paint, letting that harden overnight. And then I do a little bit of sanding, but you don't want to sand through to the cherry wood too much. And then using one of those Scotch-Brite pads, the blue or green Scotch-Brite pads, and that will take off as much of the paint as you desire, but leave enough of the copper look where the black paint and the cherry. And so this bowl had some staining on it, just because it had been wood sitting around for quite a while. And I wanted to cover that up with something, so I did just the copper look on that one. Same process on this, except you add, and this was the core from that one. You add, after a light sanding of the black, but not all the way through, just getting it smooth, you add the blue, and then again, you sand that, and just the natural irregularities and pressure on the wood will take it off in a few places and not others. And you sand as much or as little as you want. One thing I like about this is you're not really in charge of the design. It comes naturally. So you never know quite what you're going to get as far as a pattern. You can come in with a lathe stop and sand a little extra somewhere. But I like to just see what happens. And as it's turning, you start to see a little of the copper color. And then you say, okay, let's stop and see where that's showing up and what it looks like. And then both of these have 2 coats of the General Finishes salad bowl finish on them. The milk paint acts as a sanding sealer, so the first coat actually comes out quite shiny. Sometimes I just do perfect. I think that's just 1 coat because it's you wipe it on, and then if you don't get it, if you get it on too thick, it drips. You get the little drip marks. So I tend to wipe it on and then immediately take a dry paper towel, wipe it off. But if you do that after it started to dry at all, you'll get a matte white where so you need it to stay completely liquid, wipe it off, still liquid, and then just let it dry and you get that nice shine. Preferably in a dust-free environment, which I don't really have in the shop, so if you feel that, there's probably a little dust in there.
This ragging it or paper toweling it the first time?
Paper towel.
Everything.
Yeah, I use those shop towels. They're a little less lint. You could probably use a lint-free rag.
That's 1 coat.
So that's just 1 coat. This is 2 coats, only because the first coat, well, yeah, the first coat had some drip, so I sanded them out. Second, I think it has 3 coats. Second coat, I didn't get it quite the way I wanted. I did 1 last wipe, and sure enough, I got a dry spot, a matte. It leaves like a matte finish. So I did a 3rd coat, and you'll see it's still not perfect.
What are you doing between 600?
Yeah, 600.
So it's cherry.
Tiny thing. That's cherry, and it's called old-fashioned milk paint.
The color you use is
Black. Just black. And when you get back to almost the wood, you've gotten rid of most of it, you get that copper. The same thing Al Skirt does with his carved rims, and then he buffs them back. But the key is not to sand too much. If you sand too much, you'll get down and they'll start to look like regular cherry.
Yeah.
So I only sand a tiny bit just because I'm impatient. But once you start to see any of the brown, we do 320. 320, maybe a little 400. But the main thing you want to do is use the Scotch-Brite pads.
Okay.
Because they're abrasive enough to take off the paint, but not to take off the wood. And so it won't
burnish.
take away that. It does burnish it a little bit. And then I chose, sometimes I finish these on the vacuum truck. I chose to leave the bottom because this looks kind of old and antique. I thought that would show you that actually it's a nice new bowl. So there's your fresh blue look. This one was done on the CNC machine because I don't have the patience to make a fluting jig, but it's the same idea. And you can get a rotary for that. So you could put something like that on a rotary and do the same idea. You can paint first and then carve, or you can carve, do a little bit of sanding, and then with a dry foam brush, you can paint without getting down in there. I actually did a little bit of both on this one. I do find that it's best after you've got it all done to come in and do one last cut, get a nice clean edge right there on the paint, get a nice clean edge. The outside edge is not as difficult to not have the paint come around the side. A little bit of sanding right there, and that cleans up that edge. But I did come back in with a tool and just do one last little pass at the beginning to get that clean edge there.
So that is milk paint.
This is the same milk paint, same black milk
So
paint.
you don't
on all
really
three
have
of
to
these.
worry about when you're turning it to get it through the pores, through the grain, and come the other side, right?
No,
Like the
It's-
dyes.
right, no. And this is quite thick, but if you got it down into these grooves, you probably would have a hard time sanding it out, so it would suck into the floor. I think, having done it both ways, I think in the future I would paint it first and then carve it. And then I don't have to worry about getting any down in there. So that was just 3 different examples of milk paint.
Chris, can I ask you a question? So I remember in your presentation when you showed the milk paint, the brand is important, right? To get the cherry effect.
I don't think so. I just happen to, this is the only one I've ever used.
Okay.
Old fashioned milk paint.
Okay.
There is another fairly popular brand. I don't think it matters as long as it's the milk paint.
Okay.
Would you,
Anybody-
what's your source of that, Chris?
Excuse me?
What's the vehicle?
I mean, how am I putting it on?
Pump water.
It's water, yeah. Yeah, this is a dry powder we mix with water. I mix it quite thin. In fact, sometimes I mix it so thin that you don't really even have to sand. But I wanted to get a little, but then you don't get this blackness. And then a couple of times ago, we were talking about what to do with cracked holes. This one had quite a large crack in it, and we were looking at the bandsaw jig and putting various things in. So I just split this one down the middle, ran the 2 halves on the jointer, and glued in a piece of maple. I'm not sure it's great, but it's one way to solve a crack. But I thought it was interesting because the piece I cut out, you could inspect it, and it's not off by much, but it does get a little thicker right in through here. And then, of course, because of the tenon and the foot, it's quite a bit thicker down there. My guess is that this thickness, particularly right in here, is what's causing it to crack as it dries. I don't know, but from everything I've heard is you want to try to have that as consistent as possible, and then dry it really slowly. This was in a cardboard box with a bunch of shavings. I checked it after a couple of months, no crack. I checked it a couple of months later, and there it was. So
Was it a full-size block or roughed out?
it was roughed out. So and there's the crack. You can see all the way down to here. So it was a pretty bad one. I have another one on the lathe that came from the other half of this piece of wood. It could also just be, I think sometimes some of the cherry is less stable than other pieces. That one is a very, very small crack that's closed up. I'll probably just glue that with some super glue and then do the blue finish on it. No one will ever see it underneath there. That's my hope at least. But that was interesting just to look at that. We don't cut our bowls in half very often, but I think that when you do, it does help you see your wall thickness.
Is the reason that you didn't use 4-aught steel wool was because you're using milk paint with water?
Yeah, I don't ever use steel wool with anything that's water-based because you get the rusting of the little pieces. I also just hate using steel wool. The steel dust is kind of nasty.
3M Scotch Brite, my friend.
So, yeah.
Now, another thing with cherry,
Cell Val's retirement.
if you leave a cherry ball in sawdust, sometimes it'll hit the black markings in it, so that it's really almost better to do paper bags and cardboard box, like you said.
Yeah. I have not had great luck. I lose about, when I do the bigger bowls like that, I lose about 20% of them to cracks. And I don't know why that is. I have tried the paper bag and the sawdust. I've tried sealing it with the anchor seal. I have similar results. I'm open to anyone's suggestions. Everybody seems to have their trick to have it not crack, but I think the thing I've noticed is consistency and wall thickness is probably one of the most important things. And then just
Turning down past Just get rid of all the pith.
Yep. But I think also not just all the pith, but maybe even a little more than that.
Yeah.
If you try to get as close as you can, which we all do, right?
Yeah.
I think you're more likely to crack it if you're willing to take another inch off. What's that?
You ever used pig? Oh, yeah,
No.
So,
So you're getting the alcohol in to replace the water.
My gallon bucket full of alcohol.
I can't get a signal.
What? Why waste that on a
So
bowl?
I'm screwed.
Oh, then you use it afterwards? Okay.
Yes. The alcohol combines with the water, and then when it evaporates, it takes the water.
Takes the
with it.
water out.
Takes the water with it.
So in that case, you're making it dry really fast.
The other,
but you're replacing the cellular structure with.
Right. And then has anyone used a kiln to dry their blanks?
No.
Because it would strike me that that's also drying really fast. Even that causes crack.
The person to talk to about that is Andrew Pierce.
Yeah, because he does all of
And
it. Right?
he's got like 99% average.
Really? He does some big bowls, so. Yeah, I would like to experiment with that.
It's temperature control and adding humidity at various times. So
Oh.
you're bringing the humidity down slowly. And they're actually, I think they're introducing steam at various.
how long
That's what I
are
was
his
gonna ask.
bowls in the kiln, Dave, you know?
I don't, but it's really short compared to what.
I mean, like 2 weeks or a week,
No, I think it's like a month, but I might be off. I'm not sure.
we had that tour a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm quite there. I can't remember.
I don't like if you're trying a 1-inch board, it's about 2 weeks, but it often splits at the ends.
Yeah.
Has anybody used the movers cling wrap that you can wrap around the top of the bowl? You know, with that plastic, like saran wrap almost, stretch wrap. And some people do that if you rough turn a bowl and you're not gonna get back to it, that you wanna turn it green, that's a way to keep moisture in. But I don't know if you could just wrap part of it. The cracks are because of differential drying.
Right. The rim drying faster than.
So I think it's a way to keep the rim moist if you just wrap plastic around the top third or.
I can go around.
I've seen that. Never tried
It's
it.
the same idea as the anchor seal.
Well, actually, the wrap
Would be
also
really
holds
good.
it too. I'm not sure if it puts enough pressure on it to keep from cracking as well as.
Yeah, it could hold it.
Would you have to use the commercial stuff or just use a present seal? Which is like saran wrap on
Yeah.
sticky.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that is enough tensile strength. I think you'd have to use the stuff that you use.
What about just like packing tape? You wrap that around the outside nice and tight and then fold it over.
Well, you can do an experiment.
Residual
You have a
loss.
20%. You have a 20% loss now.
Yeah.
Randomize the bowl, 2 groups.
We have to cut about 1,000 bowls to be statistically, but it would be a good test. Anyway, let's keep moving
I
on.
got one aspect that
Yep.
I tried, it's just another method is, I'm actually using dry towels, wrapping them in towels and put them into a paper bag, and the towels absorb it sort of at a slower pace.
Slowly.
And then
They
I
probably
come out,
cut down on the mildew.
yeah, and then I take those towels out, you can feel the moisture in them, I'll just throw them in the dryer, dry them out, wrap it
Put it
in.
back up again.
Yeah.
They'll tell you why.
My wife all needs brand new towels now, so
You mean kind of
this
like
is
the
not tape.
microwave?
No, I don't.
I'm doing the microwave, and then when it's hot, after I take it out of the microwave, I put it in the vacuum chamber. And I get about 4 ounces of water out of it, and then just put it in a bag and get it out. And
Are you getting the little micro checks though at the rate of that? No. So you're doing the first drying that way, but you're still then letting it do its final drying.
Yeah.
Yes, that speeds it up.
How long, okay, how hot in the microwave?
probably 120.
Okay.
It's hot. You don't want to hold it.
Right.
So I put it in a plastic bag, grocery bag, so I can just grab it by the handles and put it right into my vacuum chamber. My vacuum chamber is a sewer pipe end cap that fits into another end cap. So he'll take this bowl, and the sewer pipe end caps have a rubber seal. So the top just fits down over the rubber seal. Comes together. So we got it at the plumbing company junkyard. $5.
Bring it to show and tell.
Yeah, I'd love to see the connection that you have. Is it just like a little nipple collection? You put your clear tubing on, or is it
Yeah,
screw on?
just drill a hole in the top,
Uh-huh.
and there's a bar, and then you push in there, and then you go on to your. I'll bring it in. You got it.
Yeah, I would love to see that. We got a couple more bowls that we want to look at. Let's see the one in the far corner there next. Another cherry with a different finish, I believe.
So everybody, this is Ryan. He's one of our newest woodturners.
Great.
Oh, so this is pretty basic, but it was made of kiln-dried cherry, and the foot is just for Nova, like G3 chuck, and I used a shopsmith for it. I think I was spinning it too high, but I'm not exactly sure, because I started getting a lot of like micro cracks, and I wasn't 100% certain about that. And then I used beeswax and mineral oil for the finish.
Very nice. Good job. Were you spinning it while were you getting the cracks when you were sanding?
Yes.
Yeah. You could turn very high speed when you're using the gouges, but when you're sanding, you really want to slow it down because you don't want heat building up, and that's what probably causes the micro cracks. But looks good to me, though.
Yeah.
Good job.
Good
job.
This is like a general question. So one of the big problems on this one, so the thickness is too much, and then also the thickness on the bottom is a bit much. And I was just wondering, like, how do you usually gauge the thickness on the bottom? Because the bowl that I did after this, which is also cherry, it came up pretty nice, but I ended up punching through the bottom because I couldn't actually.
Who's done that?
I think Dave should answer this because he's never.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club.
That's what black walnut's for. On the bottom of a bowl.
Yeah. So to remedy the one that I did after this, I just returned. I had like a scrap piece because it was initially like a full block that we got from a lumber yard. So I cut off the corner. So when I was cutting out the circle, I just took like the corner piece and I used a bandsaw to like make it a little bit more circular. And then I turned that using a bit of like thinner jaws. And then I just tried to get as close as I could, and I ended up getting like a decent fit. So the glue worked pretty well. But then I still had like a cap on the bottom. So I used, it was like a steel pad or something like that for a Dremel bit, because I don't actually know where my like sanding bits were. So I just sort of went for it, and it ended up giving me a really cool like burning pattern on the bottom like cap right there. I thought that was interesting.
Well done.
Well done.
Back to your original question of how do you gauge the thickness? There are a couple ways. One is you can take a jig. I think you have one over there. That's a board going across the front lip, and I just use a pencil or some depth gauge down the middle. Then you bring it outside the bowl and you eyeball it and you say, okay, there's where I am. Or sometimes you just use your tool and put your thumb on it and eye across the front, and then bring it to the outside, and that tells you how deep you are there. Or if you're using you were using external force to chuck that, right?
Yeah.
If you have a tenon and you're squeezing it and your jaws are a little bit wide, you can sneak your caliper in there and check.
Oh.
Now another thing is you could take it off, check with your calipers, put it back on. That would be a little annoying, but that would be another way to do it. And I'll do that with students sometimes. They'll turn something, they get this nice big bowl, it's got a big tenon on it. And before we take that off and back cut it a little bit, sometimes I'll check to make sure that they've got enough. Because there's nothing worse than having it look great, turn it around onto your jam chuck, go to do your foot, shorten your foot a little bit, start to back cut it, and oops, now you've got the donut, and now you're putting that walnut on the base. So
That's design. That's design.
Dynamic redesign.
Exactly.
Lampshade.
The other thing, for calipers, if you don't have calipers big enough for doing finding the depth of or the side wall of the big bowl, you go to Home Depot and get a I think it's 3/16 aluminum rod. And you bend it around in a circle and get, so you've got your 2 points matching up. It's the best calipers that I have, and it's what Ellsworth uses. And you can spread it out if you have a thick bowl, or close it in. And then what you do is you run it into your bowl, and then it'll be thick. And as it gets thinner, you'll see the space left on your calipers, because your calipers don't move, they stay stationary when you go in, and you can eyeball and see where you're too thick or too thin. It's a really cheap caliper.
We got one last set of bowls, 2 bowls in the middle there.
In mine. I got this big reading machine and I wondered what it did, and so I went down the other day, turned a couple of bowls. And actually, I'm thinking of starting my own church, and so I thought I'd have to have a plate.
I'll give to this one.
I got a little bit of change there. Actually, I want that back. Change.
It's a hobby, and I have a source, and thank you, Mike, and it does turn like a dream. But it's foam bone dry. I don't know how much your content is, but it's gotta be 6 or less, and it's dusty. I'll say that. And the finish is pillow wax that you would like. I only go to 220, and then I use the
Scotch Brite?
no steel brand triple E.
Oh,
The wax and the triple E stuff. And I only use paper towels for safety reasons. Well, I always use paper towels. No, seriously, because with a rag, if you get a catch, you got this thing going around, paper towels.
Yep.
On the note of the shell wax, remember last time I had some of those dried out and tried to rehabilitate it with some denatured alcohol? It didn't work.
Didn't work.
No. I did find though that those hard pieces, they're almost like beeswax.
Well, yeah.
You can rub them on
Yeah,
something and
yeah.
then buff it. So they work like a hard carnauba wax or hard beeswax, but it didn't work to rehabilitate it that way.
Many years ago, probably pushing 20 now, I had a can of Minwax oil-based poly, dry out.
Right.
That was the greatest thing, because you spin it on, it would melt the stuff and go right in and then polish it. That was really just something.
Was it hard as a rock or was it a little bit good?
No, it was hard as a rock.
Really?
Then break, chip it out of the can in chunks, and then spin it on and work good.
All right. Should we move over?
We got one more thing.
Let's go over here and then we'll go to the jig. Oh, I mentioned this last time. This is just another small project I do with the kids. It's kaleidoscope. And it's kind of neat because the rod is liquid filled, so stuff falls through. So as you hold it, you see it falling through. There are 3 mirrors. You get the kit, it has the mirrors pre-cut, which in some of the kits were a perfect fit. In this kit, it was not, but you hope they're a perfect fit. You have to have bushings. It's just like your pen, except you have to have the right size bushings. If you don't, you can turn some. That's what I did for this one. But this isn't the egg one. There's one that's shaped like an egg, and I wanted to bring that up last time because who did we have in here? Collins. Janet Collins. She loves to do the eggs because the egg is a very subtle curve, and no part of the curve is the same, and it feels really nice in your hand once you're done with it. So they have the same kit, but it just has a brass cap here and a brass cap here. You put it inside an egg, and then rather than the rod, it has a small little compartment, and you can put little plastic chips of colored stuff in it. But it's an egg that's a kaleidoscope, so that's kind of neat too. But the one I made, I gave away to my nephew, so I don't have it. But just if you're looking for one more small project to do for little stocking stuffers or something, I thought those were neat.
You want to show you?
No, I can.
Oh, it's in there.
Let's go over to the big stuff next.
35.
Peter, could I have you help me out? I'm gonna move the computer.
And they do a lot of work on all this stuff, contractor. But I got the job of redoing this little ball at the top, this tiny little ball.
Wow. Just a little finial.
Yeah. But that blue ball is 2 feet high, 18 inches in diameter. And this is the one that came off. And it had seen some attempts at repair over 120 years. But this is an amazing piece of engineering because it fits, there are 8 boards coming up. The steeple are tapered and to a sharp point. And so the top of this is an octagon. It captures those 8 boards.
Wow.
And in the middle of those, the top, which is 6 inches in diameter, there's a mast that's 11 feet long and has a wooden core or sheath kind of with steel bands around it. That mast goes in the top end, which is a 6-inch hole. And then there's the top end. And what happens here is it goes down in, and the bottom of that mast sticks in between the top of those 8 boards. Okay. Now, this is way the heck up there, and it's taking the wind over a couple hundred years and transferring those forces into the steeple and into the rest of the structure. So they needed a new one of these. Well, eventually, we found some black locust in Putney and glued it up into 16 pieces with sections cut off those pieces, so we ended up with a 6-inch hole up the middle.
Mike, would you do like a stave construction on this or rings?
I took a what?
Like a stave construction
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
need like
there's
a.
sections, and you can see them here. You can see the lines here. There's 16 pieces lengthwise.
Do you use splines or you just glue them up together?
Just glue them up with
Type on three?
type on 3. See these metal bands I really beat them on there. They're not gonna come off.
Did they come off the original one? Those
Yes,
bands? Yeah.
we had them sandblasted and epoxy primed. So this block, before we put it on the lathe, weighed 250 pounds and over 20 inches in diameter.
Or did you lift it? With the
Well,
crane?
there were 2 of us. And I send the one around with it on the lathe.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So these are just what you see here. There's one with no paint on it. And then it cleared the bed by about a 1/4 inch. and it was amazing. I had to make a plate to go on the ends because you can't chuck nothing. The manual might have been better, but it turned the lathe on. It spun the belt a little bit and it squeaked. And when I turned it off, the braking of the motor couldn't break the momentum of this thing. So it tried to keep going and unscrewing the faceplate.
Right.
So I put those little set screws in. Whenever I turn it off, I just lean on it and have it break. I used a 3/4 inch sortie gouge for most of it. Big bowl gouge to take it off. And breakers to make these steps. Wow.
Now, how about the band screwed on around the middle there? Is that just decorative or
It was on the original.
it was on the original
so I
one,
put
so you
it
wanted to
back.
do it? Yeah.
And I had constraints. I
But-
couldn't use my imagination.
That must have been wrapped around.
It was wrapped around, and actually kind of
Overlapped a
like
bit?
this a little bit. And I modified it a little bit, put screws through both of them.
Now, does the mask apply pressure to those staves to hold those in place? Is that the purpose of it? So like, does the mask go in here to apply pressure onto those pieces?
No, the mast is, holds a big weather vane up there. And that we had, like this wide vane, and we had the sheet metal and manual or forged castings. We had that all full plated foil. So I cut this with a chainsaw from the 6 inches to the octagon. It still has to get some final fitting, which goes over the top of the steeple.
And how is that held up? Is it screwed in, or is it just a friction fit?
There are big bolt holes in the old one you can see.
Yeah. So it's bolted on, and then the mast is probably bolted in as well.
So it's not jammed down.
That's how to tie it together.
Yeah.
But it's just from 1799, I can't imagine doing all this.
By
hand?
There, bolt holes here.
Do you know what that original wood was?
No, I guess it doesn't sound good. Maybe pine. I don't see much for knots in it, no.
Bunch of nails in it.
Yeah, this was put on with hand forged square nails.
Geez, couldn't you have used that over again, just put some epoxy?
Yeah.
Some people might.
Little Bondo, that would have been for another 100 years.
Yeah, about 100 gallons of Bondo. It's like a $100,000 job getting this thing down and rebuilt with the crane expense.
Yeah.
So you want to
About half of that went to the wood turner, right?
None of that for the wood turner.
Well, that's great.
Any
You
questions?
have to bring us a photo when it's all up and put together.
Yeah, that's awesome. It'll look like this one here.
Okay,
Not gonna look any different.
Putting by Paul, and last name. Anyway.
Petrie.
Petrie, was it Petrie? Anyway, he had a indexing jig that he made out of a piece of plywood. And then he had his router stand sitting on the ways down here on a piece of wood, and he had a piece of wood that came up here that he clipped to his index jig so that he could turn just a little bit. On my Powermatic, this piece fits all the way onto this shoulder. So, and this Powermatic's a little bit different, so it won't go on, unfortunately. I had made everything out of plywood, but the plywood actually started to bend a little bit. And you know, when you got it spinning and it's only got a little bend, it magnifies that quite a lot. And Sid and Lorenzo had some corian. Yeah. They just picked up from the cabinet, place at kitchen place that they were throwing away. So he gave me a piece of corian. And this is great to work with because it mills just like wood. And you can glue it up and you can screw it together and all that. So this would fit all the way on. And then this is my indexing jig. And Ed Orecchio had a little one made out of plastic. So I borrowed it and I drilled myself from the holes in his. And so that goes on next. And
This is also Korean?
yes, this corian too. I put this one backwards here. I gotta turn it. Okay, so now I can index like that.
Cool.
And then if I want to get between the holes, if I get really stupid, then I can do it like that. And it's really sturdy. I mean, it doesn't move at all. So that I was good with that. Of course, you chuck. There is room for the chuck on mine because this goes back further. Also had a hard time. I think Paul said that you can. Let's see. What do you go? Diameter times pi divided by the size of your router bit, and then you have to mark with a pencil every time. I gave up on that really soon. So I had to have this. So much easier. And on any one of these circles, you know, you flew all the way around. So you can turn it by one dot and see where your router is gonna land and decide if you wanna be on, which ring you wanna be on, and then it's just a matter of, you know, pulling this out, pull it out, put in the next one. All right, so that's all that for me, and the Corian is really good. I really recommend it if you can get any and you wanna make anything. So then it's a matter of how am I gonna hold my router, and if you remember, his was really tall and sat on the ways down here, and I found it to be really shaky. And of course, once you get the torque of your router going through the wood, and the wood is you know, different hardness here and there, so once it shoot fast, it's really hard to control. So Ed Arecchio had one of these, and also Al Sturt, we went to his place one time, and he had made something like this to mark vertical on his piece. So I had to go over to Peter, of course, because I needed a steel rod that was threaded, and this is a little pipe flange. So Peter made this up for me, and slip it on there.
Is there a patent, is there a part number for that?
Peter had it.
A piece of 1-inch pipe.
We tried it, but no,
Go in the hole.
yeah, it wouldn't go in here.
Too big.
Yeah. So that's why I had to invest in that.
I figured you were okay.
So then I had to find something to hold my router, and so I thought I'd make a little box, and Ed gave me this high density plastic, like the nozzle, and so I made the little box so that it would you know, just be the right size, fit in there, and it also gives me the ability to, you know, make it a little deeper or a little shallower. And but you know, it's a little too slippery, and also it's still kind of light. And so again, I stole Ed's idea, and this is a drill press vise. So put it in the drill press vise and crank it up a little bit, and put this little guy on and create a little pressure on the top. And that's really, really solid. And with this weight here is great. And you know, you got anything, a lot of things that hang on to it as you move it back and forth. So then this is wider. So certain bowls, edges will hit the bowl when you start it down here. So we want to make a little skinnier one. Same idea. And then I said, well, I had a bunch of leftover chlorine.
Yeah.
I wonder.
All in one piece?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
No, it's one,
Not
two,
bad.
three, four feet. It's screwed together with Craig screws, and you know, it really's got some squeeze to it, so it's got some flexibility, and of course, you know, it doesn't. If you pre-drill it, it doesn't split. And you know, I could put on the belt sander and round it over. But it'd look better, you know. All right, so that's what I did.
So
It's
there-
part, you could have injection
Use
molded.
that one only now?
Yeah.
No,
Or 3D
actually, I
printed
don't
injection.
use this
Yeah,
one. And
that's-
I haven't tried all the router bits, so I'm gonna keep doing more. But I need to get some bowls turned so I could dry them, so I have something to practice. All right, thanks.
I have one question about the indexing jig.
Yes,
So that's turning with the chuck.
this part turns. The blue one turns with the chuck.
How does it? Is it somehow attached to the chuck so that it doesn't slip at all?
There's a collar. So this piece fits over the collar.
Right. I understand that. Yep.
Right, so this
Just a
doesn't
jam
turn, there's no problem. But this fits between the collar and the chuck.
And you're just using the pressure of the tightening the chuck to keep that from slipping.
Exactly.
There's no pin or anything.
No pin.
Okay. But it doesn't slip if it's on there nice and tight.
Oh, yeah, no, it doesn't slip at all. Once you get the chuck on, you know, nice and
Yep.
tight, and then you move the chuck.
And that moves with it.
Yeah, and this moves with it, and
Yeah.
then you get to the next hole, and the next hole. Yeah.
that making that jig would be a great project for the CNC router, because you could just draw a circle and then your drill hole and say, I want 64 of those, or I want 36 of those, or I want however many. And it could drill them for you perfectly. It would save you from having, now if you had a pattern, at least you had the pattern, but you still had to drill them all by hand, right?
This is more tedious than.
Yeah.
You volunteer?
Well, if someone wants to do that, I'd be happy to work with you to make the pattern. Once we have the pattern, it would be pretty easy to cut.
Yeah, and this could be plywood, 3/8 inch plywood, if you couldn't get the corian.
Does the corian come thinner than that?
I don't know. This comes from Sid's cellar.
Yeah.
So,
That's just that lathe, so.
What's the thickness on the plate?
This?
What, a half inch maybe?
Corian does come in 1/4 inch.
1/4 inch. So you got to.
Yeah, but I think you,
But would it get too flexible if it,
why would you want to go thinner?
I don't know, just to have more threads and do
Well,
your
you
chop?
would anyway, because.
No, I realize that, but you still, plus on this lathe, that back one. So in other words, your shoulder of your thread, of your rod, comes out more than a half inch?
No, it's just like this.
Well,
In other words,
pull that
I
one
have
off.
both of these on.
Yeah, but you're saying that one fits over the shoulder.
Yeah, all the way over here.
Right.
Over
You
that
see how that shoulder's only about 1/8 of an inch, whereas you're half inch here, or maybe that's a 1/4 inch. So you'd have to, for your back piece, it would have to be thin enough to not.
Or you just make a big hole in this one, so it fits all the way against the yellow part here.
Right.
And then that one fits all the way against the shoulder right there.
Right, but you see right now, you only have a 1/4 inch in between there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Unless you did a big enough
it's
hole to
really
fit
gonna be
all
like-
the way back.
You're gonna lose one thread by coming out a little bit more.
But you need, that goes back to my earlier question. If you did that, you'd be putting pressure against that rather than against the shoulder of the chuck of the drive center.
Well,
So,
I think you could make it.
but you can certainly figure that out.
Yeah.
It does, this piece.
This piece, you really only need, no, you need it to put your pin into, right?
Yeah.
Or clamp.
Or clamp.
And you need it to clamp.
It could go up around the whole yellow.
That's right.
Yeah, this piece would go all the way back to the housing of the tailstock.
Right. But you understand it can only be as thick as that amount of silver sticking out.
Okay, but then it's gonna, you got this part of the
Right.
shoulder here that the chuck can't come back over.
Right.
So you two shoulders. So you got two shoulders, but this is gonna be all the way back. And this
Yeah.
isn't clamped anything. It just
Just
sits
sitting
on
on
the
there.
bed,
Yep.
and the hole is cut so that it sits perfectly.
But in order to get the pressure on the round plate, the
Right.
index plate, you have to
Gotta
have
be on
that
the shoulder.
fitting against the shoulder.
Right, and that comes back against the shoulder.
I wonder if that other lathe is more of a shoulder.
No, Gary's is a,
Is it
it's an
older?
American-made 3520, no suffix leather.
There's a way around that too, and I can bring mine in next
You could
time.
put a space, you could just put a spacer on it.
I have a way cruder version of this that I made way back when that takes that out of the picture.
You could even
That
set it, you could
becomes
set it on the
not a
top.
problem.
You could even set on the.
Mine sits on the side.
Or the
And
side, but
yeah,
you
so
could, you know,
it's where the pins go in. Yeah.
And do your holes around.
Yeah.
Can you get this in different colors?
Yes. I got it in white, but it's like
Mustard?
marble. It
Yeah.
really looks cool.
Mustard yellow.
Nice, really nice.
Must have an airbrushing session coming up.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's definitely a number, and it'll figure out the space.
Nice.
Good job, Gary.
Oh, it's a cribbage board or something.
Yeah,
It's definitely-
But then I started doing research.
Long ago.
And then I started doing.
I'm gonna let you do your own introduction. I'm not exactly sure what to call all of this.
All right.
All right, but do a little introduction for the video that's gonna be online,
Great. I am pleased to have convinced Leah to come to this meeting, my wife of many decades now, and an artist who's done many different genres. And so I'm going to let Leah tell you what she started to think about as she saw the cast-offs when I would make full blanks and throw them into a big pile. And so Leah started to think that maybe there was something to do with this.
So, thank you for letting me come and showing you what I've been doing with all of your cast-off pieces, scrap pieces. I love them. Keep them coming. I'm happy to come pick up anything. I've been a photographer for about 35 years, but for about the last 8, I've been doing some mixed media work with encaustic. And encaustic is a very ancient material. It's a combination of beeswax and daymar resin from trees that grow in the East Indies. And it's an ancient material. The Greeks used it to coat their white marble statues. They were actually quite polychromatic with very bright colors originally. It's just that the wax has worn off of them. And also the Egyptians used encaustic paint for the famous diamond portraits, which are a millennia old. So it is a very durable material. And I started coating my photographs with it because it makes paper and fabric translucent. And this is an article that was in a London publication recently of my work, that is an abstract photograph that is printed on fabric, then coated with encaustic medium, which you heat up to about 180 or 200 degrees. So basically I melt this, and then there's also pigmented wax that comes in hundreds of colors. You heat it, when it melts, you can paint with it, and here's just a simple cup that goes on essentially a large hot plate. I use Japanese hake brushes to paint with the encaustic, or I use something like a wax writer like this, which is a petite tool that heats up the wax to the right temperature, or I use something very similar to a wood burning tool that various points fit on, and when you dip it in the wax, of course, when it's hot, it melts, and you can use little brushes to also paint on the surface. And when Rich started doing wood turning, he had all these leftover pieces from cutting out bowl blanks, and I thought they were beautiful. So the first one was this one, actually, is the first piece that I ever did. And this is, you must have cut a bowl blank out at the center of it. And he just had this hanging around. And I said, wow, that's really great shape. I love that shape. You're not going to just throw that away, are you? And he said, oh, I probably threw a lot of those. I said, no, save them. So basically, when I coated the wood with a gesso, we need to use an encaustic gesso to both seal whatever materials in the wood so it doesn't leach through later, and also for the adhesion of the encaustic wax. And then I painted this one with a little brush, doing different texture techniques on the surface. And then this is a photograph of mine, double printed on handmade Japanese paper, coated with the encaustic medium, and then I just made the form to go on in the inside of the wooden shape. This piece, these normally, of course, hang on walls, but this basically hangs like this. This is called presence of absence, or absence of presence, either way. This is Pecky wood, which is cypress that someone got for me in Florida, and he knew he knows now that I love really quirky, weird pieces of wood. And what happens is that the cypress is in swamps or rivers, streams, and it rots. The fungus basically rots through the wood and creates these openings. So I just exaggerated the openings that were already present in the fungus that was inside the wood with little files, and then painted it with the encaustic paint, used this little wax writer tool to make the raised surface and rubbed sumi ink into it, and then you have to fuse between layers of encaustic with a torch. So you can paint a layer, and then you have to fuse the successive layers to each one before it so that they stick together. So you basically fuse it by melting it to, again, about 180 degrees. This is a little torch. I won't probably fire it up unless somebody wants to see it, but I have big torches. I think it was Julia Child that said every woman should have at least one torch. I've got 5. And so little torches like this are great for getting into little tiny areas that I need to fuse the wax on, as well as if I need to burn anything out. And I've got big torches, and that's the small. Oh, no, I have a little pen torch too, which is really cool. So this was someone's reject bowl that was in one of the boxes that was donated so kindly. All I did, I'm not interested in being a turner. I have done woodworking, but I thought it was a perfectly beautiful shape. All I did was smooth off the bottom, and I think it had a crack in it, but once you put the encaustic paint on it, you know, it fills in.
No more cracks.
There's no more cracks. And then and then this is a technique that I've been developing where I painted the white encaustic paint on first, and I used titanium white, and then I coated it with India ink, cut through with a razor blade or a tool, fused it with the torch, and then washed off the India ink so that it just stuck in certain little holes and in certain texture
How did
places.
you wash it off? Did it actually
Just with
come off?
water.
Oh, really?
It does
We-
come on, because it doesn't.
Because it's not, it doesn't fuse. But it cuts.
That's right, that's right. So I've been doing some big paintings using this technique as well. And then once I wiped off as much as I could of the India ink and it just stuck in all these little crevices, then I basically fused it again just to make sure it was fine, very lightly with the torch. In this case, this is a piece. So this piece and this piece were actually part of a series that I did having to do with my mother's dementia. So somebody asked me, where do you do these pieces? And what I was responding to here was the beautiful, this is called gray matter. And like the holes that actually appear in a brain with dementia, I was really interested in the texture of this beautiful gold piece. And I don't remember who I got this from. It might have been the fellow that does the hats. No.
Johannes?
I'm not sure who I got
We
this
were
from.
at Johannes's and he gave Leah a whole mess. of
Yeah, he
work.
gave me some beautiful pieces. I don't know if this was, but I thought that this reminded me a lot of the structure of the brain. And then after I coated it with the encaustic, I took a little tool, a potter's tool actually, and just carved through, bringing back out the curvature in the grain here, and then put this is kind of green circuitry with wire and pieces of horsehair, and then these are little photographs of bits of thoughts that are kind of interspersed in the piece. And that was also this is part of the same brain series, this piece of stuff. And then this piece, I might have done this piece from Hannes too, I can't remember. But this, I like just taking something as I find it without changing. I just love to look for things that interest me. And then this piece I thought was just really fascinating, the pattern of the insect markings underneath the bark. It looked like some kind of hidden cryptography or writing or some kind of message in the wood. I just thought it was really beautiful by itself. And I just charred bits of the wood, put some black encaustic, some clear encaustic medium on these parts to preserve the wood, painted the top with the black encaustic paint at the back. And then this piece is called Broken Promises, and I wrote little broken promises on these pieces of paper, rolled them up, coated them with the wax, and strung it across the top to make it soft.
Sure gives the impression that it's just levitating because of the blacks on black.
Well, I just thought that the piece of wood was just a really interesting shape by itself. So I'm always looking for interesting pieces of wood. I have one series that I did with tap poles that were in trees that people tap, but then they should be beautiful openings. So if anyone has any of those, I would take them gladly. But I'm always looking for pieces like that. And I think the wood has a natural affinity for the encaustic, which is a material that I love to use. So I'm going to keep doing more. And, yeah.
Does the encaustic have a waterproofing component, you find,
It is waterproofing, basically.
as well as preservative?
Yes. And it is fragile. I mean, it's a very durable material. All these things that I'm which have been around since I think it's 1300 AD or something like that. But it is brittle, so I have to be careful if I ship pieces to shows in the winter when it's super cold. The wax does get very brittle, and also if I ship in the summer, I insulate all the containers that I ship in so that it doesn't get, it would have to get over 200 degrees to actually melt. So it is fragile in that sense. But yes, it is waterproof.
Where do you purchase it from?
I get a lot of wax from a place called R&F Plastics, which is in Kingston, New York. They're a huge supplier. It's an independent company. R&F it's called. And they sell many, many, many colors of the pigmented wax as well as just the plain encaustic medium. You can buy the medium itself, which when this is melted is clear. So that's what's on the wood here. And there are different hardnesses available of this. So the advantage of pairing the beeswax with the resin, the Damar resin, is that it makes it raises the melting temperature, because beeswax I think is 120 and encaustic is about 160, 170 up to 200. You don't want to go to 220, that's toxic. So I'm very careful to ventilate my studio, and I have thermometers on every hot surface where I heat up the waxes to make sure it never gets over 200 degrees.
When you brush it on, how do you heat it up, and then how long do you have to use it before it goes up?
It starts hardening right away. So basically you heat it.
Is that sitting on a hot plate or
it's
something?
sitting on a big, I actually have several things in my studio. One is a big aluminum heated plate. And I can coat big pieces of fabric on that. And then I have a smaller one that I heat up, and things are in little pans like this. Once you take the brush out and it hits the air, it starts hardening right away. So you have to work very fast. And
do you
then
heat the piece of wood up
you
at all?
use it. I do warm the wood up a little bit. And if I'm painting, I do paintings in encaustic also. If I'm painting on a panel, I heat up the panel first. And I can actually keep the panel on the large plate that I have, and that heats it from underneath. But you do have to work fast, but the advantage is that it's dry immediately. So you can keep working on something, putting successive layers on, or you can start carving it right away. Whereas I also do work with a material called cold wax, which is beeswax with oil pigments, and those take forever to dry. They have other qualities, but the oil itself takes a long time, whereas this is, if I start painting on this, it's dry right away. I can color it, and I also use pan pastels and other coloring materials sometimes, and I can do that on the wax right away, which is a great advantage.
What's the viscosity of the material, like on the little bowl, when it's hot, when it's working? Is it
It's liquid.
Okay.
It's liquid.
So it takes several layers to build up.
Yes, yes. This is probably so encaustic gesso to start for adhesion, And then, because it's cheaper, I usually use the clear medium. And when this is melted, it's clear. To coat a few layers and a few layers of the white paint. And you have to fuse between the layers with the torch. And then if I need to carve it at all or smooth it, I do that with a pottery tool. And then I put the India ink on and then wipe it off and then just lightly fuse it all over just to make sure it's really in there. Yeah.
Any benefits of using the blocks of encaustic versus the pellets?
The pellets, I didn't bring a bag of the pellets, but I do use both. It depends on what you're melting. I have a big griddle, essentially. It's a Teflon griddle that I melt encaustic in, and then I pour the pellets in there because I can gauge how much I need to fill the whole griddle. If I'm melting lots of little colors, the colors don't come in pellets, they come in blocks.
Okay.
And the blocks from RNF are a different shape than these. They're more square and rectangular, and they fit in these little pans, and then you can have lots of colors. You can mix colors right on the hot palette surface. So if I wanted to combine these two, I could just mix it up very quickly on the palette and paint it that directly that way.
Can you melt them together?
Yeah.
The colors?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can literally just take, if I wanted to combine these two colors, you just melt a little bit of yellow, melt a little blue, mix them together with the brush and paint right away. So it's easy to do little areas quite quickly. What I love about the material, besides, I just love that it's a natural material, that it comes from beeswax and tree resin. It's an ancient process. I love playing with the torches. And it's I think it's magical. I really do. I love it. And it has a lot of versatility.
Wow.
Any other?
Thank you so much.
Very interesting. Will you come back and do a hands-on demonstration?
I would. Yeah, I could bring my little palette and do a demo.
We'll bring you all our bowl cut-offs.
Right.
Yes, any pieces of scrap. I like making something out of things that other people would just throw away. This is a company in Canada, Kama Pigments, which is a very nice company, a small independent company, terrific customer service. I like supporting them. But the RNF company is the biggest encaustic supplier in the country. And really good company too. So, okay.
I guess we're going to segue into a little homage to Jack Vesery. I went to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport this fall. It was a wonderful experience, and I thought I would just explain what you could experience if you took advantage of a week exposure to a course that was called Form and Design. So it actually started out with form, and we spent about 2 days on that, and then moved into design, which was carving. It was wood burning, not pyrography, but wood burning to sculpt the wood. And it was painting, and it was gilding. So it's a lot to do in 5 days. And in fact, all you could really do is get a little smattering of knowledge, I think, for all of it. I may have mentioned at the last meeting that Jack and his assistant, who was fabulous, are both going to be down in Gatlinburg this coming summer and do a week-long just in form. And what I mean by form is the first hours when we got there, he had an egg on the table, and he said, everybody go to your lathe and make 3 eggs and come back, and we're going to look at them. So we had 33 eggs to look at. There were 11 people in the class. And he wanted to look at eggs that were from this world, but we had a lot of eggs that were probably from another planet, because it's not so easy in your mind to create an egg, actually. Many of them come out stumpy, this is not really a good egg. Or it got a little better, more like an acorn, right? More like acorns, those of you who do some ornaments and things like that. this one's probably the most egg-like. But if you were to critique this, you'd say that's too pointy. I mean, most eggs don't. Some might look like that, but they're rare, right? It's more rounded. But by doing that exercise, everybody got to be thinking about what are we really looking for? And that got us into the next segment of design, which Jack put up one of his vases, and he said, I want you to make 3 of these. And we all went out and picked the most beautiful grained wood out of the box that we could find, because we wanted the prettiest, absolutely prettiest grained vases. And I think I shared with you the reason these are black is once we were done with them, we took them all, went in the back room, and when we didn't know it, it painted all of them so that we couldn't be distracted by the grain. We would have to just look at form. And so now we had 33 forms plus his. And we spent literally over an hour critiquing the forms. I mean, you'd think you could just do it in a hurry, but we went through and said, what are we looking for? We're looking at the shoulder. Is it at the right length? We're looking at the width of this to the height ratio. Some were taller, like this has a taller to width ratio than this one does. It's squatter. This one is kind of a nice ratio of 3:5. We went over the Fibonacci numbers. We went over the fact that Greek design is, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and onward, 21. So 5:8, 3:5, 13:21. It's these ratios that somehow inherently we like that. We don't always recognize why we like some shapes. And not everybody likes that. Some people like squares and triangles and other things, but there is something around having the right ratio. And Jack, as those of you who spent time with him or have been with him, is fairly opinionated on some of the ideas about design. And wood is not really about its grain. Wood is a vehicle for paint, or wood is a vehicle for some other process on it. But you can't have a really good final product unless the shape is right. So we did a lot of work on the form. So that was the first few days. During that time, we began segueing into understanding the tools that we would use, and they were both microcarvers. Some people had Dremels or the Fordham units, the bigger units, which don't spin as fast, but can hog more wood. And Mike is an expert in this, and I'm sort of showing you what you could learn in a week, and after you've done it 3 or 4 days, it might look like that 3 or 4 times, right? I had an exposure to it. Excuse me. So we learned how to use this tool. We learned that it comes actually, the best tool that he uses comes in a pyramid, and then you grind off the tip of it. And you can take a look at how this looks when you see it. They spin one way, so be sure that if you're not getting much grinding that you haven't reversed your spin on it, because they're all one directional. And we basically used this kind of carver to do our designs. And the first day that we did that, which was about the second day in the afternoon, we all turned blocks, and then we started doing carving. So we did bark patterns, which you'll see, and which I used on that final bowl. We carved leaves. These are some leaves. We carved triangles, squares. We did kind of an interesting, like an old animal that is in the ocean. I'm blocking the name of it now. Trilobites, where they have a center that's kind of sculpted like scalloping, and we did all these patterns. So you do the carving, and also we made tools for stamping, and you make that out of nichrome wire. Many of you have probably done this for your own pens, for your pyrography pens, but you take this piece of wire, you use pliers, you get an anvil, and then you bang out the piece that you want. In fact, one of the best things I got out of the entire week was that I was able to convert my little Cub unit, which was the only burner I had before that, mainly for signing bowls. And that's really all it's good for. It is not good for doing this kind of work. Jack changed the pen so that I could create my own tip. And when you do that, you can bang it down to a really tiny point. And if you've ever had trouble signing a bowl because it's too broad and the ones that you buy come too broad, you just make your own very tiny, sharp tip. And he puts a modifier on it, which Peter would know how to do. He gets these, they're dirt cheap. You buy some used gizmo that I just failed to write down, but Peter will know what we're talking about. And you put an adapter on it. So you cut off the one that came. Some of you have the ones that are replaceable, but if it isn't, you can cut it off, put this adapter on, which has 2 sets of screws, and then you can put any tip on that you want. And those pens are pretty cheap, and you can modify them pretty easily. So we learned about that, and then we moved into, well, you're never going to be able to burn with a unit like that. You need a more robust unit. And you have a Master Carver unit, the Eagle, which is a great unit, and the currently only commercially available one that can really handle this, although this is an older unit called the Detail Master by Sabre. This was Ed Recchio's unit, because I'm waiting to buy a unit that Jack is making, and it's not quite commercially available yet. As you can imagine, when he's doing his work, or if you tend to burn something like this, you're burning for quite a long time. And you will burn out other units. And they have fuses in them. Those are resettable in that one. And you need a really robust pen. This is the Burnmaster pen. And because they get really hot, and you're burning it full bore, 8, 9, 10, when you're dialing this up. So it's red hot and you're vaporizing the wood. It's actually flaming. These are cherry pieces and the cherry will flame. And then, so we learned different patterns. You could put a kind of a stitch pattern on a bowl. You could, this is a first, so the third day also we had to turn 3 of whatever you were going to do the rest of the week. So I chose to do calabash bowls with no feet, and I wanted to do them in a shape that I would vary what I was learning. So on this bowl, I carved bark, leaves, triangles, squares, and I made a stamp. I made a stamp from the nightingale, which you can pound out, and then many of you have probably done this, but you end up with a little stamper. I made a circular stamper, and that gets red hot, and then you basically brand all through the bowl, and that's what I used in this middle bowl. And I'll show you that in a moment. And that's made of the nightingale, the nichrome wire.
Where do you get that, Rich?
So I have it written down.
You can go Craft Supply, they'll have it.
eBay?
Yeah, I have all the suppliers written down. Yeah, so there's different gauges. There's 18, 19, 20 gauge, and obviously the thicker the wire, the more current it's going to take to heat up. So he recommends 19 frequently. I don't know what you tend to use, but all of them. You use them all. It depends on what you're doing with them. But 19 is a good one. It's fairly pliable. On an anvil, it smashes out pretty nicely, and you just want to have it so the wires don't touch each other. Otherwise, it kind of shorts out and you don't get the full pattern. All right, to make a long story short, the first pattern I did was just to carve, burn, and paint on this one. And this has 20 coats of paint. So the way you paint is and I'm giving my view on this. We have a world expert here who's about to tell us this in a moment, but you basically start with your dark colors and work to light. And you mix your own colors on your palette. This is a vellum sheet, which is cheap, and it's waterproof. And we learned that you start your painting first with India ink and blacken everything that had been torched. This is actually carved, torched, and carved with the burner, and then India inked. So this is just at India ink stage, and Leah and I decided that we kind of like it this way. And I don't really want to paint this one. I like the way this one came out this way. But this looked like that in the circle. And then you begin with your painting, and what Jack uses is this deer foot brush. So it's cut like a mule foot or a deer foot, like a paw. And we learned how to very lightly get the tiniest bit of paint on here, such that if you went on your skin, you'd barely add paint. And that's why there's so many layers. And you would basically brush your paint on there, very light coats. It dries almost immediately, and you can just keep going. Jack usually puts 20 to 30 coats of paint on his pieces. And it gives it depth, and it gives it color, and we'll learn more about that from Mike.
So you have a technique to keep it off.
Type of paint.
It's an acrylic. So yes, we used Golden is one. Blick makes their own paints. You can get a lot of paints from Blick. The Golden liquid. You don't want to use acrylics that are in a tube. You can and thin them out, but then you have to thin them out. These come as a liquid, and you just put a drop of them on and mix them as you'd like to mix them.
How do you, when you're doing this, it dries so quickly, how do you keep your brush from becoming one lump?
Yeah, the brush actually, if you keep going, it stays kind of wet. And if it doesn't, you go to the sink and wash it out, take your air hose and dry it, and you're ready to go again. So the nice thing about acrylic is it moves right along. The nice thing about Golden is on the back of the bottle, it tells you about its transparency. We use only matte ever, not anything other than that for what we were doing. It's thin or thick. It gives you all the characteristics of the paint right on the back of the bottle. Yeah, Mike will tell you more, but that's what we used up there. So on this one, I decided to just paint it. On this one, I decided to paint it and then gild it. And this one is gilded in 24 karat gold leaf. This one was an amalgam of different metals. To do the gilding, and Mike will tell us more about how he does it, but you have to have it absolutely smooth. And one way to get that is to use auto primer. If you're not absolutely smooth, we sprayed it with the ruby red auto primer, which you can buy at any Napa or other auto supply store. You want to get the one that's red because it has enough particulate matter in it to sand. And then you sand it, and then you put another layer on and sand it again. And if you have any tool marks that aren't coming out, you can actually use auto putty, the kind that the people use to refinish your cars when they're doing that. Yep. It's kind of Bondo-like. It's a clay. It's like a clay, and then you can sand that again. I have it all written down what those specifics were. Anyway, we learned gilding on this and painting on here. This has about probably 25 coats of paint on the surface of that to give it its look. And then lastly, and this one is stamped. This one is carved. And to do the bark-like look, and this is maybe bark from this world, I'm not sure, but it's from some world, you use the microcarver, and Mike will probably demonstrate some of that, but you basically carve your grooves, carve the whole bowl in grooves that you want to do, and the edges will be sharp. And then you use your burner, heat it up red hot, and you go along the edges of that. And you're basically smoothing out the entire thing by doing that. And you can put lines in it. You'll see when you come up and look at this up close that I've inscribed the lines along the edge of it to look like bark or other pattern. When it's red hot, it's just melting the wood in front of you. It smokes a lot. You should do something to protect yourself from inhaling a lot of smoke, because it really does do a lot of that. But it works very well to carve whatever pattern you want to do. And I chose on this one to do up through the India ink, and then we did the gilding with the leaves of gold.
So do you have to seal the chart on that foot somehow?
You put India ink over the char, which unifies your palette more than sealing your wood, but it kind of made the whole field black.
It does give it a little less of the training because it does kind of seal the charring so that it's not gonna come off. Yeah.
And then what are you using to bond your leaf? Using like a
So we use spar varnish. So you want to use something that can dry in about 3 hours, or it'll probably drive you crazy. Mike will tell you how he does his, and that does absolutely beautiful work. We used just regular spar varnish and sized it, basically, painted it once it was smooth. It's very important that you don't do that, and Mike will probably tell you more about it. Don't do it where you've just sanded, or when the air has particulate matter in it, because even if in a clean room, it'll come onto your face. And the gold leaf is so thin, there's about, in each leaf, which is about a little bigger than the size of this, it costs about $2 a leaf for 24 karat, depending on how you buy it. It will show all the defects under it. So if a piece of dust gets under it, you'll see that, and it'll just be there forever. What I was amazed with, and some of you may know this who climb steeples or play with things on top of steeples, the gold domes of Capitol buildings are all of that without a sealer over it. It's the gold to the atmosphere, apparently.
There is no sealer needed.
Right.
Gold is an inert material.
Right.
And it won't corrode, it won't rust.
It's also heat resistant.
If you're maybe not so intelligent janitor that works in one of those buildings. This happened in Colorado. The state dome there, the janitor put a bucket under the downspouts and was collecting all the gold that was coming out of the dome. They caught him and busted him.
Oh, wow. I was
amazed. It'll
amazed.
sink right to the bottom of the bucket and stay there.
Yeah. I was amazed. The gold leaf
It brings a new meaning to painting for gold, huh?
Yeah. The leaf comes in sheets, and you get about 25 sheets for about $50 if you buy it in bulk. But it has a lot higher price if you're just buying a little of it. And what he suggests is if people like to do this, do it together as a group. You can buy it, and I don't know where you buy yours, but in New York City, there's a great wholesaler that, and Real Chow, part of his building.
So if you had a bigger area, you can't combine sheets together to overlay on top of
So the way Jack does it is he takes the sheet out, and you think you'd lay it like that. He just crumples it up and throws it on there, and takes another one and throws it on there. And then you use a brush to brush the gold onto your varnish. And you wait until you do what's called the knuckle test. So you have the varnish drying. I had my bowls upside down so that it would get dust on them. And then you test every once in a while. You just feel to the point where it is no longer tacky. And you want to go a little bit beyond that. Not too far beyond it, or the gold won't stick. But just to the point of tackiness. And then it'll hold. And he likes to not lay a sheet. He just puts it in there, and then we all just move the gold around. And then at the end, you have extra gold. So you tap it off into your vellum paper and then put it in an Altoids tin. And then you have plenty of gold for the next time you want to do the same thing. You can take pinches of it. If there's a part missing, you just throw the gold on there and then spin it around and do whatever. So I'm telling you this as a complete and utter novice. I was just thrilled to learn these techniques. I was happy that things came out as good as they did. He told us to throw these away. Basically, don't even keep them. These are your practice things. You're not to make a beautiful thing at the end of the week. It's to learn the techniques. And he said, actually throw all your early bowls away too. You should move on from things. And I get it, but I couldn't even throw away these. This is turned green wood. This is gonna crack one day. But he said, don't hold that everything you do is the most precious thing that you've ever done.
No, but maybe keep it first.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. One of the websites that I frequent is called Wow. And recently they had a thread that said, post your first bowl. And everybody pulled out their dog dish, that they turned in. And it was really interesting to see all the beginning work. So it's nice to hold on to your beginnings. You can go back and look and go, oh God, I did that.
Exactly. He does beautiful work. I encourage you to look at his website, and his pieces are just amazing. You can't tell they're made from wood. He has teapots, for example, that you would think are made of ceramic, but just the things that he does with them are unbelievable. And he's also just an incredibly nice person, willing to share everything about what he knows to help you get to where you want to be. I recommend spending some time with him.
What's his name again?
His name is Jacques, but he calls it Jack Vesery, Vesery. If you Google him, he's up in Damascus, Maine. The Center for Furniture Craftsmanship is great. They have 1-week courses. They have 9-month sabbaticals. You could be there for a long time and really learn. Yeah. There was a several-month one that had been going on when I got up there. It was started in a guy's back garage, and 25 years ago, I think it was, and he noticed that there was a need for more instruction and people getting together, and then this thing just grown.
Peter Korn.
Peter Korn.
Yeah, he wrote a book. He's got a couple of books about it. He's a very talented, multidisciplinary guy.
He's got a book called Why We Make
Great.
Things Last Matters.
Yes.
His sort of biography.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. I wish all my students would read it.
It's a magic.
But he was out in one out west. What was that one? School out west.
Anderson?
Anderson Ranch.
Anderson Ranch.
Yeah.
He was there for a while, and he wanted to move these and started this. And struggled at first, but now it's really a great program. I keep looking at it as a place to go. But a lot of their programs are not during the summer. If you're retired and looking for things to do, it is one of the better places for that.
There's another interesting thing. The state of Maine actually gives scholarships to craftsmen. There was a turner there who was completely paid his tuition to go to it. And I thought, wow, isn't that a neat thing that the state is doing? But for us, could we do that in New Hampshire or in Vermont? To support. Yeah.
AAW also has grants
Yep.
and grants to support turners, and it's a good thing if you're really, really interested. That's a great resource.
And the school has some endowment money.
They have some
Donors,
investors.
so they
Oh, yeah.
they have scholarship money. It's a fabulous resource.
Peter Korn was the speaker maybe 3 years ago now for the annual meeting of the guild. And I don't know whether that got videoed or not, but he was very good. He was, I think at that point, it was 25th, maybe the anniversary or something. I'm trying to think. It's been a while. Will you put together a resource list and email it to everybody?
I will. I'll send it to you, one of the two of you.
Yeah, I'll put it on the website.
Yeah, I can do that, all of where you get these different things. The last thing I'll tell you is that place was really beautifully set up. There are 12 Powermatics around the room. It's about a room this size, but everybody had a station going around the room. And then their demo area was great. The way you watched was mirrors. They had mirrors set up over the lathe and then out to the room. So that it wasn't digitized. It was live in the mirror, so you could watch from different angles and see what was going on. It was really pretty well set up. Yeah. And now, as that is an introduction, I introduce to you Mike Foster, who's going to take us through some actual demo of this and really show you where you go from this to.
I took a weekend course with Jack, and it wasn't long enough. I mean, it was a lot, and I did it. I don't remember. Do you remember what was it themed particularly at the surface decoration when it
was just decoration?
It was just surface decoration.
Yeah.
That's what we didn't do the form or anything like that. So because we only had 2 days. Was it 2 days or 3 days?
Jack did a week the next summer with
Right.
Steve Gleason just on form.
Just on
No
form.
one finished anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it was pretty crammed weekend, and I don't think we didn't do any gilding, I don't think. We talked about gilding, but we didn't do any. Just there wasn't enough time. So we learned basically his carving technique and his painting technique. Mostly that was basically it. And so we did the same thing, very similar thing. We started out with, well, I think we had turn forms. Some of us brought turn forms, usually in cherry, just because that's what Jack likes to use. But we also did practice pieces, and there was just a block of wood sitting around in the shop, and I did the same thing that Rich did. And you can pass this around. So I just kind of played around and did some different textures. You know, it was a limited time frame, so we couldn't do a lot. But while we were there, you know, we were able to finish some things. So you can take a look. I used some different colors on this and did some different textures, just playing around, just seeing what textures you can come up with. And it's part of this is the bark thing that Rich was doing. So that you can pass that around. And it's decorated on all sides. Jack is kind of known for his feathers, and he went through doing his feathers with us, but very quickly, and didn't really, you know, it's kind of one of his signatures, is his feather pieces. So he didn't really spend a whole lot of time on it because he didn't want a lot of people doing that. I mean, certainly you can do it and it's okay. Well, I did some feathers, but I've never done feathers except for in real birds. Never really done feathers as a decoration like Jack does, because that's his thing, and I'm not going to go there. But I did it for my own self just to see if I could do it. And I did this at home. I did not do it while we were there. I didn't have enough time to do it while we were there. So then the pieces here are really all derivatives of what I learned from Jack. Obviously, these are all really done with the pyrography carving, and I'll show you that here. Just that. I mean, I didn't do any carving. Oh, well, I did some carving to get the form on the binary black hole, but I didn't do any surface carving, which I'll show you here, which the feathers require some surface carving to shape the feathers before you actually start burning in the details. And you do crisp everything up by using the pens to the pyrography to get some detail that you couldn't get otherwise. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that I took from him. Well, in the painting technique. Now, when we learned, Jack was using sponge brushes. So I'm going to show you that. Did you learn that? Did he show you that?
He showed us sponge brushes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does like those for broad kind of areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's a big fan of these.
I'm going to get some of those because I have other artist brushes that I've been using to do work like the bird piece.
Yeah.
And so I've been using something similar, but I like that brush. I'm going to get some of those. Yeah, so I've sort of evolved away from using this technique, but that's what I'm going to show you today. So carving, I have the gamut of carving, and I carve large things, large areas down to really small detail, and it depends on what I'm doing, what I use. This unit, I'm not sure why. I think it's not powering up, and I think it's because it's got a foot pedal, and I didn't bring it with me, and I think it has to be plugged in for it to power up. So it's just not working. This is actually a dental unit. It's perhaps a step up from this unit. Probably not terribly much more so. But there are, if you look online and you do, I'm trying to come up with the right word.
Comparative?
No, not comparative. The name of it is micromotors. If you search for those, you will see a gamut of them. And there are some made for woodworking that are very similar to this. So,
What's the name again?
Micromotor. Yeah, and that's really what so this is the workings are in here. The control box tells it, how fast to go and whether to go reverse or not. But the motor itself is in the handpiece.
So the speed ranges of these is more than a Dremel and less than a
Yes.
dental drill?
So it goes, and well, Rich's probably does too. Mine goes from 0, and it's adjustable up to about 40,000 RPMs.
That one too, 40,000.
40,000.
Some
Yeah,
of
that's
them go
pretty.
like a couple 100,000 too.
No,
I thought there were
not
some
these.
Okay.
Not these. Even my dental drills that I use, I have dental drills that are made to do what. When you go in and you hear the high pitched noise, those are air driven. And those are running at 200,000 RPMs. And that's what some of the other, I can't remember who makes the piercing tools that they sell for wood crafters.
NSK?
Yeah, NSK, that's right. That's what it is. So and that's a straight handpiece. I use an old, the one from dental school for, and they're all pretty much the same thing. And they run around 200,000 RPM, something like that. Yeah.
How do you cool dental drills?
You don't. You burn.
Yeah, and so,
That's the
well,
problem.
I'm thinking in the bearing life because.
Oh no. Now it depends on which, what kind of. There are different turbines in them, and the turbines have, some of them actually have ceramic bearings that you don't have to lubricate. Mine actually I lubricate, and a turbine can be replaced, and they're really not that expensive. They're $100 or so for a new turbine. Yeah, so you can replace the turbines on.
Like, can you use a dental drill to do the same amount of work a micromotor does?
No.
Micromotor
No.
does? Okay.
Micromotor has much more torque than you can do it, but I reach for this more often than anything else, probably. That's what I use probably most of the time. Depends. I mean, if I'm doing some heavy carving, I'm using the shaft, and I've got 3 shaft machines sitting up. I have a carving bench sits in front of me like this with the downdraft built into it, so that I'm pulling all the dust away from me. So, I forgot about Jack's, and I have 1 or 2 of the burrs where he cut off the end. I don't use those anymore, but I have one somewhere. So this is for me, this is just a little rack of burrs. I have I have 2 circular burr blocks that are full, and a couple other of these that are all full. So I've got hundreds of different kinds of things that I use for carving. So
is it like tools though on the wall where you pick about 5 that you really like and the rest of
no,
them are
it
just
depends
there?
on what I'm doing and what I'm doing where. And I'll pass some of these things around so you can look, but the carver that Rich showed are carbide cutters, and they have flutes. This one actually, I don't know. We can pass them around. So this one has cross hatches in it, and so it gives a rougher cut, but it cuts a little quicker because of the cross hatches. This one has some cross hatches in it, but not as aggressive as that one. That one was actually made for woodworking. This one was actually made for acrylics in dentistry, and I use a lot of dental burrs.
Where's your source of those tools?
Well, I've got dental sources. If you go to
Saw some enamel on it.
probably. So This is one that you can get. So any of the wood carving suppliers is going to have these a great variety of these burrs. So that one is, I believe, was made for the woodworking industry. It could be from, I don't know. I don't remember. This one is definitely woodworking. And there's several different manufacturers that do these, and they come in lots of different shapes. And I use these all the time. They remove wood spectacularly. And they have different grits. So there's some real rough ones. I didn't bring a real rough one. And they have some real fine ones. And these are the finer, about the finest grits on those. So those are carbide projections that are somehow glued to the shaft. I don't know how they do it. But I have, so my shaft machines, the Master Carver and all of the, who else, I can't come up with the name. Huh? Fordham, yeah, Fordham is what I've got 2 Fordhams. Mine will take 1/4-inch shafts. So I have some large pieces, and man, I can hog with those things, and it can kind of, if you're not careful, it can get dangerous with some of those burrs. There are several different things on here that are meant for sanding. And this is a little paper that's rolled up into a point. And this is made for the wood carving industry. And you actually, just this part is what you're buying, and there are a couple different grits you can get of these. And this just screws into the end of it. And the paper, as you're using this, will just kind of peel off as it's getting used up. And it gets smaller and smaller, and you toss it and start a new one. This is a ceramic, and it's made for smoothing wood. And it's got some texture to it, but I find it often burns the wood. It really depends on the wood. Sometimes I'll use these if they're working okay, and I have a whole range of sizes of these. And I think Fordham made these. So there's maybe somebody else that makes them too.
These burrs that you've been handing around, how do you keep them from clogging up?
Well, you really, they're not going to clog up, and if they do use I use a brass bristle brush to clean them. And if they're really, you can actually use heat to burn it out too.
Okay.
So you can use a little micro torch and burn it out.
How about the glue remover that you can use on saw blades and stuff?
I wouldn't do that. I've never tried that, but it might work. Yeah. Then the ones that I use a lot, and I'll show you what I'm going to be using here, are ruby and diamond coated. And I get both. The ruby is really a woodworking thing, and it's a little more aggressive than the diamond, and the diamond can come in different grits. And you can get real fine diamond, and it'll tend to burn more than anything, so you gotta have a real light touch with it. Ruby is kind of nice because it actually will carve, and I'll show you that. And there's a whole range of different, I'll send around a diamond and a couple different grits of diamond. And let's see, and a ruby. So the ruby, if you look at these, has a little darker color to it. And so that's how you can tell the difference there. So sanding is always an issue with carving something like the bird piece. And there's all different techniques for using sanding. I think I passed around did I pass around I think I must have the screw-on one. No, not the screw-on one, the wheel.
Paper one?
Yes.
Yeah. With paper, that's
the wheel. Yeah, that one. And that's several different manufacturers. You buy those and you put them on, and they eat. There's several discs on there, and 3M makes those. There might be another manufacturer that makes those as well. Those come in a bunch of different grits, and you got to be a little careful with those because they can kind of, especially with the higher grits, kind of make their own little trenches as you're going along. But I use those a lot.
Do you use those at the same speeds you use
I'm using those on the probably mid-range, so maybe 20,000 RPM, something like that.
And to do what do you use this?
That's for basically sanding.
You're sanding.
Yeah, you're sanding with those. Yeah. And they come in grits from about 120 up to 400. So yeah.
Question. How about using the rubber blocks that you use to clean sanding discs?
Oh, this is it.
To clean what?
The little.
Yeah, well, there is something, I didn't bring them with me. There is something similar to that for burrs. And you can buy them through the wood carving supply houses that will also clean. It's similar to that, only it's a little harder than the sanding block cleaners. These things are wonderful. And I brought 2 of them, and I use these all the time. They are really nice. And to get these on the wood carving supply, I'm trying to think of, there's a number of different suppliers I use, and I can come up with a list and put it on the website. It's all on my computer, so I can't think. Wood Carver Supply and Mountain Wood Carvers, and there's a whole bunch of, these are called cushion, and they're by a guy designed these. His name was Marsh, and I did not bring the little didn't bring the tool.
Sleeves.
Well, no, you don't replace the sleeves. They're not sleeves.
Oh.
I need a smaller scooter.
The red-handed ones. Sure. MHEBB. Okay. At what?
So it has this little kind of, it's not circular. It's kind of squashed out circular thing. It goes in the middle of the, and even on the little guys, there's special little tools to get a squashed piece of tubing that holds it in place. So, and they give you a pattern of how big to cut your sandpaper. And I use cloth back sandpaper. This is Klingspor, and it's their Klingspor Gold. It's wonderful. I use it all the time for all of this. But you can see it's a padded around the shaft, and they go, you tuck it in, and the littler ones get a little tougher to actually get them loaded, but they all work the same. You put the thing in and then twist it, and it locks it in. It's really cool, and they're really nice. So then you can use whatever grit sandpaper you want. In those.
You get pretty small diameter with
those. This is small. So that's on a 1/4-inch shaft. I have one that's about half the diameter of that on a 1/4-inch shaft. And then this is the, what, is that 1/8 inch? I think it's 1/8 inch shaft. And then there are some, I didn't bring any on the smaller 1/16 inch shaft. Oh no, that's 3/32. So, but it's all kind of the same idea. And so this one is an 1/8 inch shaft, will not fit in my handpiece. I have a couple that are smaller that will fit in this, but I use my Fordham for these. So there are sanding wheels like this that also work for sanding. And I think that's the kind of the other thing, and part of this is dental, but this is not dental. these are sanding discs, and these are the actual discs that you buy, and you have a mandrel, and you can get these in some of the woodworking companies, and they have a little thing that snaps right onto the end. So it's a square. I'll pass it around. And they snap right on the end and come in different grits. And that allows you to, and you have to be careful with those. If with the really higher grit, you can actually put little trenches in things. And then this is from the dental world, and these shafts are meant to go. See, I didn't bring this round one. Yeah, I don't have a shaft for the. I didn't bring one. I'll pass this around. But these, if you feel this, these are really nice because they're flexible, and they get real small, and they get. They're in a range of grits. They have a different shaft. It's a little round ball that connects on that, and it snaps on just like the other one snaps on. But again, that's what we use in dentistry. Okay. So I think I got through all that stuff.
Mike, do you use a magnifying glass much?
Yes. Depending on what I'm doing, I don't use a magnifying glass. I use loupes. So, you know, the things that you see dentists using when you go to the dentist nowadays, it used to be, we didn't do it. But I know almost all dentists now use loupes, and I have a pair of loupes in my shop. And not only do I have the loupes, I also have a light that is on it, and it's a pretty bright light. And so I use that a lot. I don't use it all the time. I often am working just like I am here, where I've got a really good light source right above me, because I like to vary the light, and because that helps with seeing shadows and seeing what you're actually creating, because a direct light, often you lose the depth of what you're carving. So I started just to show you the feather, you know, kind of what I would do if I was doing feathers. I'm not going to probably complete this. This is, you know, one of those things that I do just for fun. And I do this all the time. I didn't bring any others, but I do this almost, if I'm doing something new, I'll do a little test sample. So with the Virginia rails, I have a block this size with one Virginia rail, the background, and it's kind of the water. And I was seeing, you know, it was a test to see if I could transfer that to a larger piece. And I do that all the time. The little life cycle that I brought in, the monarch egg, was it last time or the time before?
Last time.
Yeah, I have a block of wood on my carving table right now that on different sides I have the butterfly on one side and the caterpillar on another side of it. You know, it's just, and they're probably going to go in the fireplace, you know. But they're fine, you know, they're not, but they're tests. And I do that all the time. So it's kind of it's a good practice for if nothing else. Okay, let's see if we can make this. So I'm just going to do a little bit of this stuff just so you guys can see how I do it. It's really hard to do it. It would have been probably better to have the video thing hooked up to see. Because I mean, I can see well, but I don't think anybody else is going to be. I'll try and tip it towards you and see if we can get it so people can see.
That's just almost too much light.
Is it?
Yeah.
I can probably do it without. It's turned on.
It's a red button right there.
Oh, I didn't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay.
That's
I
good.
got time to do it in Walnut.
You put it right flat. now.
Well, I was doing it so people could see.
Up close. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just noticed I was coming this direction with these, and I noticed part of what I do when I'm doing this, and I'm using, and that's why I was saying the burr that Rich had is cut off flat. And I often am looking to undercut things. And so I don't want, I want the point of that on there. And this is this is a ruby carver, and it does come to a point, and I want to so this feather here, I can see that there's a portion where I didn't get it undercut very well, and I want that undercut because that gives a definition. And I have like I'm carving into the next feather, but I kind of know where that's going. And you have to do that because you're overlapping the feathers, and you've got to be able to give it definition.
Even when it's turning that speed, you're not burning.
I'm pretty used to knowing that I had a little bit of burning there.
Yep.
But I just back off on the pressure, and I can kind of sand it up.
You keep moving.
Yeah. But if I really want to get it, and then the other thing is you can, if you're really burning too much, and it depends on the wood you're working with too. Some woods burn easier than others. Mm-hmm. Cherry is one tends to burn. Then you just vary your speed. You can back off on the speed.
Yeah.
So if I switch, oh man.
Yours turns off.
Mine turns off. It's like when I turn it up, it's off. It's like, oh man, that would annoy me to no end. So I was going to show you.
Yeah, they sell these.
Oops.
You know, all the like Packard and all the supply houses sell these micro carvers.
Mm-hmm.
Craft Supply.
Yeah, and see, mine is my handpiece has a collet in it, and I just put back in here that gets it down to the size of,
right. You can put bigger shafts in, or
right. You could.
smaller.
I don't have an 1/8 inch. I've got a whole bunch of 1/8 inch burrs that would probably fit that. Just that's probably what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a little adapter that allows you to put a smaller one in. Mine only has the smaller end, so I'm just using the 3/32. Yeah, 3/32 shafts.
That tightens without a tool. That's nice.
Yeah.
Should be hands
Oh yeah,
Dremel.
yeah. So it's just a click. It's yeah.
And it has a flick switch if you'd rather just do it, you know, to an on off.
So I just switched to a one of the carbide burrs that it's got a little bit of cross hatching, but it's a little more of a comes to more of a pointed shape, and it's a less of a curve, so I can use it to shape the leaves better. This has got a forward and reverse.
Maybe on this side?
There we go. That makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, you have a downdrafting thing that pulls the dust. Do you use any other kind of protection?
Yes.
Yes.
When when I'm carving, I usually have I think it's 3M makes a dust mask that has 2 straps on it with a exhale thing on the end of it. They're white. I use those. I do have, all the other gear, but that's too much to put on.
Right, the
So
helmet thing.
Yeah, the helmet thing, and I don't do that. So I'll put that on as well, and if it's real dusty, I'll turn on the down draft. So the down draft is attached to my cyclone, and it's sometimes overkill. So this is just to shape that next feather a little bit, and I want it a little bit rounded, and then I'd go back and change that and start putting in the quill.
Yeah, that thing.
So
It slides out.
Yeah. That's annoying. So then I would start putting in some detail. Normally, I would also have started undercutting out here, but I'm just trying to give you a quick. It's really.
And you layer the leaves, right?
Yep.
Or the feathers, whatever you're working on. You start at one end and layer them so that they go in.
And in a bird, they are kind of in a pattern, So if that is a natural thing, is for them to be sort of. I kind of went a little bit askew with these guys, and the quills are bending in 2 different directions. Normally, they'd probably all be bending in about the same direction. Yeah.
You get up close. Yeah.
So the quills are the shafts, and then the barbs are the little. Well, the delicate little feathers.
Going off to the side.
Yeah, things going on. And
you do those with them.
I would do those with the burner. Yeah. So that's, I mean, I can really get detailed with it, but you get the idea. And I would go back and use like one of the finer diamonds, probably to smooth this out a little bit before depending on what I do, but if it's smooth enough, once you start burning, it's not going to matter. You're going to lose. It doesn't have to be perfectly sanded.
Yeah.
So we can show some of the detail with the burning. And since this is just a play piece, I'll show you some of the barbs. Oops. Oh no, I need to be plugged in. Yeah. What's that?
What kind of a burner are you using?
Okay, this is Jack's Eagle. This is the Birdmaster Eagle, and it's not. You can't find it anymore. I just got educated on part of all of this, and then Rich was talking about what Jack was doing, trying to come up with a thing. Is Birdmaster went out of it. They're not doing this. They're not building these units anymore, unfortunately. And that was Woodcarver Supply, or I think it was Woodcarver Supply that built these. And so they're not building them anymore. You can't get them unless you can find them on eBay or something like that. And I was looking for, a writing tip pin, and I don't think I brought one with me. And I need to look at Rich's thing, because I did buy some real fine tip. I ended up talking to the people, who's the other manufacturer of brake carvers. Yeah, I talked to the guy there, and he was very nice, and we talked for quite a while. And I was talking about, I said I had to burn master and had to get me an adapter for his pins and stuff. And he said, oh, he's the one where I found out that they had gone out of business.
Yeah.
And then when I took the class with Jack, he, I think, was using the company that made the pins for Burnmaster and had them make a heavier duty pin, and that's what this is.
It's super heavy duty.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of them. So one of the things that
and the cord is heavier. A lot of them don't have as high a gauge.
Cord. Yeah, so because you're pulling a lot of amps through there.
Yeah, and those will heat up if you just got the thing cranked forever.
Right. So one of the things that Jack always says is, you can, this will, even if it's not sharp, it's going to cut and it's going to melt wood, but you still want it sharp. And so this is just a diamond card, and I have it sitting right by my carving table, and I give it a couple strokes. Eventually it's going to go out, and I'll have nothing left. But I go until I have shiny metal at the edge.
Now, can you replace the wire in that?
No, not in these pins.
You could adapt that one.
You could probably adapt it. Yeah.
Yeah, because he does that, and he exchanges them. And even these companies, they'll tell you they have the real micro wire for signing. That's still so broad. So Jack showed us a couple of things I didn't tell you. One is he carved with an axe as a skew. He took an axe. It was full axe, sharpened, and then he just was showing us on spindle turning. And then he also said, wait a minute. He pulled out a shovel, a spade, and he carved with the spade. Now he's known for that. If you go on YouTube, he's kind of known for that. But he brought them. And he showed. It doesn't matter what your sharp edge is. You can pick any sharp edge. But he showed us how to pound that out to a really fine point. And then he took one of those cylinders like I made, and he started signing his name. Normal, smaller, smaller, smaller. He got it down. I swear that thing was like a 32nd of an inch. He had his name signed.
I need to look at that.
With a point, because it came to a spear point.
Yeah.
And you're just using the tip of the spear point.
So this is hot, and you're sitting there tapping it with your fingers.
It wasn't on.
It wasn't hot.
I just about that.
That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
You wouldn't do what you were doing. You can see it.
Yeah. See, I kind of back off a little bit from what Jack was teaching, and I don't do it glowing. So I'm going to do this pattern. Okay, I've already put some India ink on this part because I'm going to paint that and let you see how I paint it. But I'll start with this pattern and it's basically this pattern that I just copied, and that's one I just kind of dreamed up. And what you're wanting to do with this is, and this is what Jack teaches in the class, is it needs to come to a point, because when you're painting, if it's got any of the flat surface or the flat surface of the bowl, you're going to have a bright spot. Like when you're painting, it'll end up being this big bright flat spot on it. So you want this to all come up to a V-shaped point, okay? And so I've cut a V right over here, and I'm going to cut the next one, and so I'm going right at the top edge of that and cutting in and trying to make sure I'm cutting a V. So I then, now I actually cut that. I was using that as a cutting tool, and I can do the same thing here. However, I find that when I'm doing the other side of the V, it's easier if I'm melting it away, as like Rich was saying. So I'm going into the depth of where I cut before, tilting the pen, and just melting the wood. And then I'm at the direction, so I'm angling my pen different ways. It's easier for me to have the pen going away from me. So I've tilted it this way to melt that side. Well, I just come back and cut the next V on this side. And then I turn it around and melt away this. And you can go a little faster if you have it a little hotter. Like Rich said, if you have it hot,
You can sometimes
I was going to say if
yeah.
I can get it to flame, but I'm not. Maybe it's not quite.
Sort of surprising.
Cherry will definitely.
Cherry flame.
Cherry will definitely flame.
It's got some oils.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you just keep kind of going like that, and that's how I did the pattern on this. And you can see there's a lot of smoke, and that smoke is not good to breathe. And Molly Winton would be the one to tell you about that, because she had to quit. She was known. That was her thing, and she was doing the stamps like Rich was talking about. She had made her own stamps and made her own signature thing. Was her burning, and she's been doing it for years now. And you know, she was demonstrator at AAW numerous times, and she had to quit because of it was her lungs. And so there, I can't remember, I think it was Gorge Supplies. Somebody makes a vacuum. Maybe it was for, I need to look that up because I haven't got it yet, to actually take the smoke away. It was meant, it might have even been for soldering. I'm not sure, but it was a unit that was actually sucking the smoke away. But what I do, you don't want to blow air onto this because it'll cool off your pin. But what you do is you put the paint fan and point it away, and it'll suck and usually the smoke, if you are close enough, will go right in and will get blown away from you. And that's what I do.
Those little silent computer fans are good.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you can buy, so the laser engravers, you can get a filter system. It's only $3,000. Have a filter system.
Wow. It's actually very cool when you're doing this because it is like melting the wood. You're changing that whole.
But I wouldn't have thought of that idea that it's got to be pointed. You're making peaks, so when you add the paint,
it's at the highlights.
Yeah, and you don't have a flat spot at the top.
Yeah, because if you had a flat spot, because you're adding,
it's gonna shine
and what Rich was saying is true, and I do it the same way. It's what I learned from Jack, is that you build up you start with the dark colors and you go to the light, and those light colors, if they're hitting that flat spot, it's going to just shine at you. Yeah.
These are special handles that you're using?
They are special duct tape handles.
Yeah.
So the aluminum here, that's what comes from the manufacturer, and I use, I don't know, computer pad or one of those things, just foam with duct tape around, and so it's my way of, because that pen gets hot.
Really hot.
Yeah, even the red one that he's got over there, I've got a couple of those. They get hot. So I've gone to this method for almost all my pens. I wrap them all like that.
And those pins come from that same company?
Well, these pins didn't. I ordered these special. That's when we took the class from Jack, and he told us where he got these. Extra heavy duty ones. No, I don't think you can get them.
I don't think you can get those pens. Jack is probably half a year away from having his commercialization of his units. And what he did is, as good as these have been, he has it so it really can crank for hours at a very high output, and very thick wire and very thick handle with the insulation. Burn mask, you can still get these, but they're not the same unit. These had replaceable fuses or something like that, and then you can reset the fuse if they got overheated. And so that's one of the problems. Like, you can't use a cub. That's for signing a bolt. There's no way to have enough heat output for enough time.
I'm gonna turn this down and just see if I can do a couple of quills here, or barbs. So what I would normally do is I would come back before I even started on the barbs. I would accentuate the undercuts.
But all of this is for carving, basically, not for the color that you're causing, because you're going to go back and paint it.
Right.
So you're thinking of it more as melting away wood as a carving technique.
Oh yeah, it's really just just giving you the shape. And like you said, if you go to Jack's site, you will be amazed at what he does. His work is outstanding. So I'm just defining the quill, and I just got away from it.
Do you find that the grain pattern, when you're truly carving, grain pattern's always an issue. Do you find with the hot knife that you can go cross, with, down, uphill, doesn't matter?
Yeah, that's the nice thing about it. It really doesn't matter. So we'll just, so barbs, you want to do the same thing. This I would want my glasses, my loops for this.
Which is that?
I think so.
So I'll show this after we use the whole.
So Mike, it's more of a cultural question, but what are loops?
It is
magnifying glasses that like surgeons and everybody, so they have magnifying, so they're like,
they flop right.
Mine are like a safety glass with that flip down in front of me, and
What's the focal length?
mine is 18 inches, I believe. So it's got to be 18 inches away, and your depth of field is you have to be right at that, because
I got some, but they're only about this much.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, and that's why you
Well, I use it for something, but yeah.
I see.
So you can get the idea
It's a
from
box,
that.
probably. I bet it comes apart. Let's see.
A little too close. Oh, there it's focusing. They're all holding.
That was a little crack, but I thought that was. Is this the box?
No.
No, it's not. Okay.
It's not.
Oh, no.
I'm disappointed.
Sorry. So there is a crack in that, and that was in the drying process. You guys were talking about drying. I force dried that in the microwave, and that's where the crack.
Yeah, it's beauty.
Then it pulls out the whatever it is, moisture, whatever.
And it was cherry.
That was
cherry.
stained.
Yeah. So did Jack have an influence then on a lot?
Oh yeah,
most
definitely. I mean, the technique came straight from him. Like on a number of my bigger pieces.
Yeah.
One that was the best in show at one of the AAWs a few years ago, also sold it at that show, was a globe, like a sun on a Mobius ribbon stand that I made.
Yeah. Coupling it with your mathematical
Yeah,
stuff.
and
that's great.
And this one, you can't really get the sense of the color, and it depends on how you look at it. Sometimes if you look at it, you think it's just black. It's like, what's that? But it's
changes.
Yeah, it really changes. Yeah, and it's depending on the light too. That how the light hits. Okay, so where's that sample? There it is.
I'm gonna come back to, oops. He's gonna paint it. You want to see it or? no, I'll
Send it to the painter.
Send it to the painter.
So I'm going to do a real quick thing, and it may not come out real nice on coloring this, but we'll see how it comes out. I got to have light for this. So.
Do you mostly use the sponge brushes?
No,
No.
I actually don't.
Yeah.
Although I did on that, the green piece. I think I might have on that piece too, but on this piece was brushes. But I like your brush better than the ones I've been using. I have a scat of. I used to actually do oil paintings, but I also still buy brushes for this kind of work that I do. So what Rich was saying is that you kind of dab it until, and that's what I do. I mean, my palettes look nothing like yours. Mine are covered.
Right. Right.
So I do that, and you're not going to see anything. It is applying color when you do this. Mostly just to the tips.
The ridges, yeah.
And it's dark to start with, and you just don't until you start getting lighter colors. It's a deep color that you're getting, and there's still some flats. It looks like on here that when I did this, I kind of did it fast.
Now, will you go back and fix that?
No, not on this. No,
This is to put that
No, but I
color
mean,
right over the chart
would you
with-
go back and fix it on a workpiece?
Yeah, if it was a real thing I was
Yeah.
going to do, yeah, I would definitely look at it real closely and make sure there were no flats before I started painting.
But if you start painting and discover something, can you go back or no?
Yeah, you can go back. The problem is that, and I've done it, I know from experience, the smell of
Burning
melted
acrylic.
paint is not so good.
Do you find that if you go back and fix one little area that it's very hard to get it to look exactly like all the other areas?
Not usually. You can usually imitate it pretty quickly, pretty well. I have a few different pieces of some of my funky shapes that I've done where there were defects in or a crack or something, and I couldn't get it. It kind of stood out, and I wanted to hide it. I can actually blend a paint and make it go away. It's gone. So yeah, if you play with it long enough, you'll get the color right and make it look right. And with this technique too, you can blend in to the surrounding areas. So if you're repairing one small area, you can blend it in.
One of the reasons you want to be very light, as you're seeing Mike do it with the application, if it's too thick on your brush, you'll fill in the grooves. So you want to be careful that you're and you want the grooves to be black from the India ink, because then that gives you that contrast, depth. And then your highlights are on the lighter pieces are on the peaks.
Sometimes I've varied that. On some of the pieces I've done, I've gone back and actually colored the depths of a color that I wanted rather than the black.
Yeah.
I wanted more color in it. And so I'll go back and kind of vary that idea, but it's still the same idea. And then I'll build from there.
Right. He'll do that. Sometimes he'll get towards the end when you think you're near the end. He'll lighten it and then go back to a slightly darker shade.
And I do that quite often.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through steps fairly quickly here and not kind of dwell. I'm not going to do 20 layers like but it does go quickly, and it's really not as bad as you might think, because this is dry already. What I already put down is already dry.
Yeah.
So I use these artist palettes, right? I don't know if that's how yours came, Rich, or
yeah, I just use the vellum stuff. It's similar. It's just a paper that is waterproof, kind of.
And So
Michael's has them down at the, you can get them for like $3 per sheet, 20 sheets or something like that.
We talked about the fluid. So these are, it's called fluid acrylic from Golden. So that's the what Jack uses is fluid acrylic.
Is that thin enough to go in an airbrush?
No, it's not. There is a Golden makes a medium that you can add to it that will thin it down enough to go into an airbrush. But I also have airbrush medium. And I often will, if I don't have the right color, I'll use that with this technique as well. It's just a little trickier to use because it's thinner. But I often will do it the opposite way too, is you can start to see some color in there.
So why are you using different colors? I mean, you got a red, you got a dark purple, and then red on top of that. So now you have reddish, you do different color purple.
Yeah, we're going for sort of a red finish to this, and that's
so why wouldn't you use red 10 times?
Oh, you could, but I like to give it some vibrance, and the purple is just a adding blue to the red, and gives it depth that you're not going to see the purple, but it gives it a vibrance that's worth it. And if you see Jack, what he does something similar. He will use different colors in it that you won't see. The color you really see is kind of the last colors you put on, the light colors. And I'll do it here. I'll add some white to it, and that really makes it pop. The white takes the paint though. This is transparent paint. So it's paint that you can see through and see the colors underneath. You start adding white and you've lost that. The white is not a transparent paint. And if you add it to anything, you're gonna make it, it's gonna be opaque. So you really do that just on the very last layers. Yeah, let's do a lighter red here.
Wow, already it's getting a richness.
Yeah.
Do this on the steeple wall. Carve that on
I'll say if you did fill in some of the deeper valleys, can you take that brush and possibly?
It would be hard to get it out. Yeah. Now you really start to see it.
Yeah.
This is really fun, and it's kind of mesmerizing. It's nice because you're not creating dust. You're not having
nice music in the background.
Yep.
The dog beside you.
Yeah.
Glass of wine.
Even that. That's okay. You don't have to worry about the wood flying off the lathe.
You only drink wine just before you start turning.
Is that why you?
That was bourbon.
So it does follow
You were
the
using
strength and
the
the feel
axis
that you
skew
do.
chisel.
But now you can start seeing color. And I'm just going to kind of speed it up, and just so we can call it good.
That's nice.
I like your idea about Jack and the shovel and the axe because I think next year it's Sunday.
Oh, you're going to show that? That's a good idea. You could show that.
I think so, huh?
You could.
Show the kids how to do it.
You just created a monster.
Uh-oh. All right, I can see all kinds of scythes and all kinds of things over there.
Oh, side would be, yeah.
Scythe, yeah.
I use hand blades.
Yeah.
All right.
So Rich was saying you mix colors on the palette, and that's what I'm doing right here. I just added some buff, which is a white. It's not quite as bright as titanium white, which is real white.
but I mix it with the brush on the palette, basically.
It's the fun part, to make your own colors. Oh, great.
Yeah, with the bright light, you really start to get that sense of the sheen.
Yeah.
Depth of color.
Oops, you're down too low.
Handle it.
You're too. I was gonna move the computer to a.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I said, over this way, look.
Works for me. Yeah.
Don't pull the computer.
That one time too, I was hooking up an MRI scanner. The magnetic field affected the skew of the monitor. Radiologist comes up, says, "Can you fix that?" Sure.
I'm seeing the purple coming through as well too, which is really nice.
I do see the purple
Yeah.
now, yeah.
It's amazing how that's
great.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to turn that into something now. You gotta put it on the, you gotta put it on, it's gonna be something thin, but it'll be something.
One more color. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It'll impress a lot of people.
Did you want the bottle or?
No, I want the thing. I was sort of like
that's-
do a straight on shot.
Do you have a light? Oh, no, there we go. Ooh, nice. To tilt, yeah.
So Mike, technically you do not need a finish over the acrylics,
No,
right?
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an acrylic. Sometimes I'll put some Krylon matte over it if it's some of these should be a matte finish, but sometimes just as a little added thing of protection. But the Krylon matte doesn't show, and it's really pretty much. That's often if I've got some bare wood somewhere that I want to protect as well.
And that's just a like Krylon matte.
It's the one I usually use is Fixative, and it's a matte.
So when you say fixative,
Fixative, that's the name.
that's for mostly like charcoal sketches and all. Right?
Yeah, yeah, that's what they sell it for.
Yeah.
But it'll work for work like this. And this real light colors, I just barely hit it. And it's just enough to make it pop a little bit. So I used pretty white. I used a real bright red and titanium white. I did put enough titanium white out. But it's enough to make it kind of pop.
Yeah. Beautiful. Very cool.
Great.
Here, I'll move it again. There you go. Right.
It's amazing how when you were burning it, you didn't see the detail.
No. But it's there. And that's part of the deal, that why loops or some sort of magnification in light is really good, because you've got to be able to see that detail, because you're putting it in there and it's going to pop once you start giving the color. And kind of the black all kind of blends together and you know, without really good illumination. So I'm sitting with the light similar to this, usually working under that. Usually that's enough. Sometimes I'll use the magnification if I really need it.
If I looped, you mean those glasses the hygienists wear, they're like 7X or? I'm trying to think. Mine are 15 power. 15X? Yeah. And they have a focal length.
Yes. Yeah.
You gotta have it right
right
where
there.
it focuses.
And it's actually at a comfortable. It's meant for dentistry, but that's to be
comfortable for us. Maybe just a little closer than, because we're used to having a patient's head right there.
Yeah.
So it's a little closer than where you'd be holding a piece of work, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
for this. Yeah.